Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Today I have some pretty intense bloodshot crazy eyes because I did not sleep very well last night. But I suppose in keeping with crazy eyes, we've got Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. Because I did a video a while ago, and by a while ago I mean over a year ago at this point, where I did a little design critique on the Mortal Kombat ninjas. Now, I felt like it might be appropriate to sort of draw them myself, to sort of see if I can maybe do some design changes, see if I can make a design that I like. Because there was definite preferences which I found that I had for certain sort of designs as I was going, so I wanted to see if I could incorporate those into something that I liked overall. But yeah, so today we're doing Scorpion. I'm going to be talking a little bit about design, mostly design, a little bit about detailing, a little bit about posing, and to a degree, we'll be talking a little bit about over-design, because that's also something which I think is worth mentioning here. But anyways, without further ado, I'll get on with this and I'll show you what I have. I'll roll the intro first, of course, but yeah. So, alright, this is what I've got. So, what you'll probably immediately see is the fact that this is kind of the Mortal Kombat 11 design with some changes. Because what I've done is I've sort of merged the core Mortal Kombat 11 design with some of the classic designs, specifically with a little bit of the classic costume that Scorpion has in Mortal Kombat 11. That's where the sort of gauntlets, or the bracers and the boots sort of come from. I wanted to sort of keep the sort of ninja thing going on. I wanted him to look more ninja-ish, because I feel like a lot of the time he's very armory, and I feel like that is sort of counter to the ninja thing a little bit. I also felt, if memory serves, whenever I did that video, I talked a little bit about how I felt like the Mortal Kombat 1 design, the new Mortal Kombat 1, is a little bare. I think I would prefer something a little bit more interesting. I feel like the Mortal Kombat 11 design is to me, I prefer that design to a lot of Scorpion's designs, but I also feel like it's a little much in places. Same with his Mortal Kombat 9 design. It's pretty good design, but it's a little over-designed in places, and I felt like they really maybe didn't need to hammer home the Scorpion motif quite so much. This is kind of why I like the Mortal Kombat 11 design, because there isn't really much of that in the reference that I'm looking at here. And there also isn't a billion and one skulls all over him. So again, I've tried to keep things low in terms of, I want to say low tech, but realistically speaking, what I mean when I say that is that there isn't much in the way of like belts and stuff like that. It's mostly like little bits of wrap, like that's what his belt is. His belt is it's like a tie. It's not, or it's like a fabric belt. It's not like an actual like hard belt. And then his mask is sort of the Mortal Kombat 1 mask, but it's also a little different, because what I've done is I've sort of given it this sort of deep sort of skull shape, because I think that makes sense for the character. And again, there's a lot of lines on it, but it's not, I feel like it's not over designed. And again, one of the things which I want to mention here is to me at least, the key to not over designing something is to not put too many lines on it. Now, for example, something which I would say definitely has a little too much going on is this sort of area down here in the Mortal Kombat 11 design. Now, I like the red, the way they incorporate the red in there, because I think the red acts as a nice sort of complementary color to what Scorpion's got going on. I do maybe think there's a little too much red, but yeah. So what I wanted to do, which I think I will still do, is I'll give him, I think I'll make his belt red. I merged the two words in my mind there. And then this sort of under wrap on his upper piece is still going to be red. But I changed this sort of under wrapping on the robe of where it's sort of, it has this little sort of skirt thing going on here. I need to maybe trim this in a little bit. I think it's a little too long. It should maybe stop at about here as opposed to down here, maybe about here. Because that is an element from the older designs, and a lot of his older designs, specifically his Mortal Kombat, original Mortal Kombat, and then Mortal tattoo and stuff like that. He does still have that sort of like ninja robe element of where the sort of under robe part sort of has this sort of flap, but then it kind of hangs around the sort of bottom of the waist. And I've given him, he's still got boots, but there's a sort of little divot in there where it has that sort of ninja toe thing of where the sort of big toe is kind of vaguely separated from the rest of the foot. Now something which I've done here is that he's holding the spear. Now as you can see, the line here is a little off, so I'll have to go back through whenever I'm doing my details and then clean that up. Another thing which I'll have to do is I'll need to have the chain wrapped around his arm. That's one of the things I wanted, is to have the chain like properly wrapped around his arm. And I have a brush which can do chains, so I'll probably do that rather than having to individually draw them, because that's a bit of a nightmare. Drawing them individually is something of a nightmare. Now originally what I wanted from this pose was to have it coiling around the arm and then the other arm sort of pulling it back like that. But that doesn't really make much sense, I felt like. So instead I had this other arm in a sort of, it's a sort of kind of ninja pose like that to a degree. It's a sort of close-knit fighting pose. Because in my mind I would think that rather than Scorpion having a bunch of swords and stuff like that, it would make a degree of sense for his primary weapon to still be the spear. To me that makes a lot more sense, is the throwing spear as being his primary weapon for the most part, and a lot of his kind of fighting moves would sort of work around the spear. To me at least that would make more sense, but they seem to like the swords idea, so yeah, I think in Mortal Kombat 1 more of his moves revolve around the spear, so maybe I guess there's that. Yeah, for Scorpion specifically, I like the hood. I don't think the hood works for all the ninjas. I think certain ninjas it makes more sense to not have the hood. I think for a character like Sub-Zero, it actually works better for him to not have the hood. But I think for Scorpion, I definitely like the hood. It's the type of thing where it's a case-by-case thing. I think I like it for Scorpion, I like it for Noob, I like it for a few of them, but not necessarily all of them. One of the things which I'll have to do here to make a change is I'll need to bring his eyebrows down, because I want it to seem more creased and angry, because it's not really seeming like that now. They're a fairly neutral area. He does have pretty big, like Eugene Levy eyebrows, so maybe I might need to trim those down a little bit. But yeah, in terms of the design, it's fairly simple. I prefer simple designs for the most part. I wanted to try and keep this simple, but while still giving him a decent amount of stuff going on. Because I mean, again, one of the things which I think I mentioned in the design critique video is that for a video game, you only have to, typically, whenever you're doing a 3D model, you only have to model it the once. Meaning you can have your design be as complicated as you want it to be, because you only need to model it the once. It's the same thing with a film, of where in a lot of movies you see a lot of designs which I or others might consider a little over-designed, but in a film they only need to make that costume a couple of times. They need to make 2 or 3 of them, they only need to design it once. And then it's just a case of where the people who make the costume then just work off of that design. It only needs to be designed the once. Whereas a lot of the sort of simple design, whenever you're thinking of simple designs, a lot of those come from mediums like comics or in animation or stuff like that, where you have to draw it a lot of times, meaning that it behooves you to make it simpler. Whereas with a lot of video games, a lot of movies, a lot of stuff like that, they don't need to do that because they only have to make it the once, so they are at liberty to make things more complicated. Hence why in a lot of as Mortal Kombat goes on, the designs typically get a lot more complicated, because they can. Because they're allowed to. But I feel like I definitely prefer when these designs are simpler. I prefer whenever it's more readily readable in that respect. So I have sort of tried to keep it reasonably simple here, because I think that makes for a more interesting design. But yeah, so as I say, I try to keep things sort of low-tech is the sort of word I use, but I don't know if that's not necessarily the right word. What I mean to say is I just sort of keep it and kind of mostly sort of keep things as sort of roby and things like that, so it's not too like because the idea in my mind is like, if he's running around with armor and stuff like that, he's not going to be particularly stealthy. And as a ninja, you're supposed to be stealthy. So he's not going to be particularly stealthy if he's decked out in big armor that will be like clunking along as he's running. So I try to keep the hardware here to a minimum, and try to keep it sort of stuff that wouldn't be too loud. And so yeah, the only thing that maybe would make noise is the chain, but yeah, you know, if he's using that, he's only using it because he's going to be attacking. So I suppose, yeah, try and keep it simple, try and keep it interesting. But yeah, I feel like I went through everything I needed to. I went through the design, went through Overdesign, and I went through the posing to a degree. I mean, the pose is pretty simple. This is a fairly simple, like, sort of close-in fighting stance to a degree. But yeah, I'll have to alter his face a tiny bit. But yeah, anyways, I think that's everything I needed to say. I will do these details, and then I will move on to the colors. So yeah. Alright, that's our details done. Took a little longer than I would have liked, because, you know, detailed character. So, yeah, I did get out a brush to use for the chain. It's a little small, like the chain is kind of thin. Typically speaking, the chain would be quite thick. But I didn't want to have it be too big, because then it wouldn't coil around the arm quite right, or it wouldn't look quite as right coiling around the arm. I don't think, anyways. I didn't really try it, but I would prefer. I think I'd prefer it being thin here, anyways. Just for the purposes of this drawing. Again, I added like a dangling part down here, but I don't think that's necessary. I think it's fine to just have it wrapping around the arm. Now, typically speaking, there's a degree of mysticism to how the chain works. It sort of just emerges seemingly from somewhere, because it's never physically shown on the design, usually, anyways. But I think it looks alright whenever it's shown on the design. I think that looks a little bit more interesting. Anyways, yeah, now it's color time. Now for the background, I'm probably going to go for something orangey or reddish, just so that we're not, just so that it's not too, again, like so the yellow doesn't blend into it too much. Because it has to be something warm, because you know the character is entirely warm colors. So yeah, I'm gonna need to go for something warm. So probably orange, red, something like that. Just something that is not exactly the same color as what we've got going on with our yellow, because the yellow will be the primary color on the robe. It's gonna be yellow on the mask. I'm not doing gold on the mask. A lot of the time the mask isn't the same color as the robe, and I normally find that doesn't look great. I feel like, especially if it's kind of a dull kind of goldy color, it just doesn't look great. I think it needs to sort of, if it's going to be a slightly different color, it needs to be only slightly different. Because I find that whenever it's too different, it just starts looking kind of bad to me, anyways. I prefer whenever it's a similar, if not the same color. Because yeah, I think just having it be a completely different color just doesn't look great. But yeah, I don't think we'll be having like an excess of silver or anything like that. It's mostly going to be yellow, black, and red, and the little red accenting on the inside of the robe. I don't know if this should be, this should probably be red actually, because if that's the underrobe, then this is also underrobe, so that should be red too, I think. That would make sense, that would make logical sense. So yeah, I think we'll roll with that as our sort of color scheme. A lot of red, a little bit more than I might normally like, but I suppose we'll see once all of it's inlaid. If I need to change stuff, I can pretty easily change that here. So it shouldn't be too much of a challenge to alter anything that I need to alter. But I don't think I will need to alter anything. I might need to turn the chain off for a little while. This is why I just kept it on a separate layer. Because if I need to turn it off for a bit here or there, I can without causing any problems. But like I was thinking about like merging those two layers. Again, it makes no difference really. It's going to be visible at the end no matter what. So I was just gonna merge it to clean up the sort of clean up all my layers. Anyways, I don't need to keep rambling here. I think I will get on with this. So yeah, my color scheme is, yeah, I'm gonna be using the same yellow for the robe as I am for the mask, because I think it just looks better. I think it'll look better that way. We'll see. Obviously, it mightn't, but I think that'll look better. And yeah, I think what we're going to be going for in terms of background is going to be some sort of orange or red gradient, something like that, just so it stands out, just so he stands out. But anyways, I'll move on. I'll do these colors and then we'll be back to do the painted shading, which I might go for something a little bit more intense this time, but I'll talk about that when we get to it. So yeah. our colors done. So now it is time for the painted shading. Now I'm gonna probably try and keep this. I think I'm gonna try and keep this reasonably, like, not too crazy. I don't think any of the shading stuff is gonna take particularly long, truthfully, because like I've not got an enormous number of colors, and my yeah, the predominant thing that I'm going to be doing here is trying to sort of wash these down a little bit. That's funny because obviously the whole hood section here is black, whereas in Mortal Kombat 11 there's the armoring on it, so that sort of spruces it up a little bit, so it's not just pure black. And it's sort of the same deal in Mortal Kombat X, of where they've got the straps going over the shoulders. So yeah, it's funny that just sort of pairing it back to the black and the yellow does actually make things... The hood now has a different sort of look to it, where it was originally more... Well, I still think it looks very ninja-ish, but it now sort of... because of this sort of strapping along the top, it sort of looks like the type of thing you'd see on an Ermac design, which is sort of funny. It's funny the way that works out. But yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to the fact of the pose here. Because the pose is tucked in, that sort of exposes the shoulders a little bit more, so there's a lot more of this on show. Whereas if he was sort of stood straight and he had his kind of shoulders back as normal, you would be the yellow would kind of cover more ground visually. But yeah, and I feel like the red isn't too intrusive. There's not too much of it. There's a lot of it, but there's not too much of it. Yeah, I tried to include as much yellow as I could, because otherwise I feel like we'd be losing something. Actually, you know, what am I doing here? I was going to shade his eyebrows for some reason in the painted shading, even though there's absolutely no reason in doing that, because they're mostly black and you're not going to really be seeing it because they're too small. Like if it was black hair and you could actually see his hair, then yeah, that might be worth doing because there's something visible there. But whenever it's just the eyebrows, there's not really much of a reason in just shading his eyebrows. I normally don't shade the eyebrows too much in other cases either. I usually only make it kind of subtle if I'm going to do it at all. But yeah, anyways, I shouldn't ramble too much. Is there anything else I really need to cover before we continue? Because this is sort of getting on now in terms of time. I don't want to have this stretch too long. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I need to cover all that much. I think I'm probably fine to just continue. The painted shading shouldn't take very long. There's a lot of these bits and pieces which I'm not going to have to do too much work on. So yeah, realistically this should be kind of quick. I think what I'm going to do towards the end is I'm going to kind of make my texture a little bit more prominent than I've been doing recently. I've been going for a very subtle texture recently, but I think especially given the sort of fairly minor, kind of the very simple background, I might sort of make the texture a bit more prominent just so that the background gets a little bit more interesting looking. And plus, it makes more sense with the character, or with anything Mortal Kombat. It would make sense to have it be more kind of heavily textured in that sense, because obviously Mortal Kombat's very realistic looking, so having something a bit more heavily textured might draw out some of that look. But yeah, anyways, I'll carry on, and I'll be back to do the detailed shading and all that stuff. But yeah. Alright, that is our painted shading done, and that was reasonably quick. So now we're in the home stretch. It's time for the detailed shading. I was thinking about maybe doing like a yellow light line, but I feel like with the amount of yellow that's going on here, maybe a white light line might just be a better choice. The light line will have to go over here, because this is where the light is hitting. This is the soft light here. Soft light is getting blocked by the arm, so a lot of the sort of area here is still dark. Now I chose to go for a very red color as my darkest. That's even still what I have here is set up for my detailed shading. So it sort of creates a lot of these sort of reddy kind of shadows around the eyes, which sort of creates this sort of like kind of evilly look, the sort of depth of the eyes. It's all very red around there, which works. Now I originally wanted to give his eyes more of an off-white color, but they've actually ended up looking very white as time has gone on. I'm not really going to change it at this point because the gradient maps might do that work for me, in theory. Problem is we've got the comparison of yellow not too far away, so it would need to be like pretty off-white in order for that to look right, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter because it's going to be white. It doesn't matter if they're off-white or white, really, all that much. Either way works, really. The off-white is just a more slightly natural-looking version of the white eyes, so that's the only reason I was kind of trying to get that working. But yeah, so I need to do what? I need to do my detailed shading, which I've already got the colors set up for, being our red and our yellow, because that's what I painted it with in the first place. And then I also need to do the light line, which shouldn't be too challenging. It'll just be a little white line around this edge. And then what else do I need to do? I need to do my first gradient map, which I've already selected the color palette for. Be very, very yellow, very red. So it'll work with what we have, and it'll obviously make things a lot darker, but that's what I want. So that's good. But yeah, anyways, I don't think there's much of a need for me to carry on talking. I don't think there's anything I need to really go over much. The painted shading did a good job making everything look a bit more natural, and I think the painted shading really does help this come together a little bit more. So let's hope that the latter stuff continues that trend. Anyways, I'll carry on, I'll do this, and I'll be back to do the last gradient map stuff and then wrap up. So yeah. Okay, that's what we've got so far. That is our detailed shading, light line, and first gradient map done. Again, I was toying around with the idea of maybe having this one be an overlay, because the overlay looks actually not too bad on it. Let me show you. This is what overlay looks like. That's what making this particular gradient map an overlay layer looks like versus it being a soft light. However, I think maybe the subtler touch of the soft light is maybe a bit of a better choice here. I'm still keeping it 70%, so you know what, let me put it up to 80%. I actually think that will be better here. 80% on soft light is probably a better choice because it's a little less blown out, but it still keeps a lot of the sort of depth of the colors. Right, so let's have a look at luminosity. This is a little desaturated because of all the brown in there. I try to keep the sort of brown to a minimum within the color palette because there is a lot of brown in it. Just whenever I correct it that way, whenever this is below, it sort of makes it look a little more orange than brown, which I prefer. All right, let's make a duplicate of that and have this one be a color burn. Okay, it's not brown at the very least. It's just a little dull. Right, okay. Now that is all dull, definitely makes it more vivid, changing it to overlay, but it's just too much. Right, okay. Well, that's what we've got in terms of our color palettes. What does it look like without the color palettes at all? Yeah. It's not too brown, it just turns that orange of the background a little brown. But that's gonna be we're going to be losing that anyways whenever we put the texture on, because I'm keeping the texture kind of intense. That'll mean that it'll sort of wash the brown out a little bit, and that should sort of fix our problem, in theory. It might not. It might not fix our problem, but I think it probably will. Right, okay. Let's stretch this over everything and let's see how it looks. Set it to overlay, turn that up to 25% seems alright. It definitely sort of makes the gradient in the background a lot more hard to discern. But it makes the background look a little bit more interesting, I think. Yeah, it makes the background look a little bit more interesting, and it doesn't actually apply very much to the character, but that's because of all the gradient maps. It's not actually enormously visible on him. It just sort of brings our lighter parts out a little bit more. That's really all it does, just sort of brings everything out a little bit more. Yeah, that looks alright. I'm happy with that. Okay. So that one was an interesting one. It was kind of tricky, all things considered. Because obviously there was a lot of design stuff I had to do, there, a lot of little bits of tinkering I had to do. And because of all the design stuff of having to do that in there, that just means that the process is a lot longer because I have to consciously think about what colors I'm choosing. Because typically whenever I'm doing this, I obviously have reference images of, and I know a lot of the time what the character looks like, so generally speaking I don't have to be super conscious about which colors I'm picking and stuff like that because I have a template in front of me. But with here, I had a half template of where I have a template, a few different templates of the things that I pulled from, but I might necessarily want to use those exactly as is. And in this case, I wanted to change it a little bit. I wanted to include a little bit more red, which I still don't think is intrusive. There's maybe a bit more than I would have liked, but it's not intrusive at the very least. Yeah, I maybe wouldn't have had the inside of the hood be red, but I don't know what other color I really could have made it. So that's the problem there, is there isn't enough colors here really to pick something else. So I just sort of had to roll with that. I think maybe perhaps they could have done with being a slight bit more yellow, but like this is the thing, the yellow and black, it's like with all the ninjas, they're mostly black in terms of their color palettes. Their sort of primary distinctive color is only so much of their design. It's only so much of their color space is dedicated to their particular unique color. A lot of the time, the color that covers most of their body is black. It depends obviously on the character. With Noob, his predominant color is black, so it's gonna be mostly black anyways. And then whenever you get like some of these other characters, it sort of depends a degree on the character. In Mortal Kombat 1, they sort of removed a lot of the black and they made it greys, different sort of tones of grey. And then there's a lot of accenting colours. For example, Scorpion has a lot of gold in his design, whereas Sub-Zero has a lot of silver, so it's a lot of different accenting colours there. And obviously Scorpion then still has the red, albeit in a much smaller degree than in 11. In 11, there's a lot more red going on in Scorpion's design, whereas obviously in 1, there's only really his belt has a bit of red on it, and I believe the inside of his robe is a bit red. I couldn't say for certain. Yeah, it is. I have the reference here in front of me. Yeah, there's a little bit on the inside, and then that's it, really. Now, that said, the red in Mortal Kombat 11 is a bit of a sweeter tone. Is normally the term I use. It's just to say it skews slightly more towards pink, whereas the one in Mortal Kombat 1 skews more orange. So I suppose that technically fits a little bit more because, you know, all of Scorpion's colors are warm tones because they're yellow. But yeah, so this is the thing. It sort of depends, a lot of this stuff. I chose to make the mask very yellow, so to a degree the mask, actually, and because of the sort of skull tone stuff, it looks kind of like his Mortal Kombat 4 mask. Which isn't amazing looking, but I think it works for this because of the sort of, yeah, as I say, the sort of consistency of the colors. But yeah, I think he looks more like a ninja as opposed to like a warrior. Which, again, my thinking is with a lot of the Mortal Kombat ninjas is that it makes more sense for them to look more ninja-like rather than more warrior-like. Now, granted, it depends on the character. Obviously, the personality of the character dictates some of that, but yeah, I feel like maybe there's not a huge amount in this design that I've got here that necessarily says like, oh, he's like a ghostly specter. I don't know how much of that really comes across in this sort of design that I've done here, but I don't know how much of that comes across in his normal design either, in any of them really. Well, any of the ones where he actually is a ghostly specter. But yeah, anyways. I think that's enough rambling. I'm happy with it. This was a fun one, if a little challenging, just for the fact of, yeah, as I say, doing that reference stuff. I did make him a little bit more yoked than I had intended on. He's pretty buff. But that's sort of the case with how he is in Mortal Kombat 11, and given that that's the primary place where I'm pulling in terms of reference, it makes a degree of sense that he is pretty buff. But yeah, anyways, with all that said, I think that is enough. I think I will start saying my outro, and then I'll leave you. So, if you like the video, do whatever it is that you normally do, whether that be liking or not. I'd of course prefer if you liked, but I can't make you do that, so all I can do is politely suggest it, which I believe I have done. Got a little tripped up in my words there. And yeah, same deal. If you want to subscribe. You can do so by, subscribing. I can't make you do that. If you want to do it, go for it. You've presumably seen a YouTube video before, so you know where the subscribe button is. It's below the video. You didn't need to know that, but perhaps you did. Or you didn't need to be told that, but, perhaps you did need to be told that. Anyways, I'm a bit flustered this time. I'm flubbing quite a bit. And if you have a suggestion for what you'd like to see me draw in the future, you can leave a comment, politely worded, or not at all. I'd of course prefer if you did do it politely, but if you're not going to be polite about it, don't do it. And yeah, if you choose to watch the next video, I will see you next time. So with all that said, I'll say goodbye and I'll leave you. So, bye-bye.